If you're familiar with the business world, or you know somebody who works in the business world, you might be familiar with the term or the concept of an elevator pitch, which is to say that if somebody were to be on an elevator with you and they asked, what is your company about? What do you do? You should be able to explain to them in the time that you have on that elevator together what exactly it is that your company does. There's whole seminars and whole sessions that are devoted to crafting the perfect elevator pitch, getting the essence of what your company is down into something that you can say in a minute or less. In a sense, in our gospel today, what Jesus is doing is he's asking the disciples for their elevator pitch. He's asking them, as we're going around to all of these towns and villages, if somebody were to come up to you and say, who is this Jesus guy? Who is this guy that you're following around? What makes him so special? He wants the disciples to be able to say, in a few short words, who Jesus is, why he's important, why he's special. It's the same challenge for us as we live out our faith. We too are called to do the same thing, to be able to, if someone comes to us and asks us, why are you Catholic? Why do you go to church on Sunday? To be able to give them, in a few short words, an explanation or a reason why we practice our Catholic faith. And of course, in the gospel, we see Peter hit the nail right on the head. He goes past all of the things about Jesus just being a prophet or another important figure in Judaism, and is able to jump right to his profession of faith that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God. We hear this great blessing that Jesus then pours out upon Peter in return, saying that Peter is the rock, and that it is upon the rock that he will build his church. But I think that we can often get a little confused in how we look at this and how we look at what Jesus is saying here and what he's saying to Peter. Because I think it's too easy to think that when Jesus is referring to the rock, he's referring to Peter himself, and that all of the church and all of the authority in the church rests squarely on the shoulders of one man. And yes, it is true to a certain extent that the Pope does have authority in the church, but that authority is not meant to be lorded over people. That authority is meant to be expressed in service. And we see that in John's Gospel, when after the resurrection, Jesus goes to Peter on the shore of the Sea of Galilee and says, when he asks him, "Do you love me?" tells Peter to feed his lambs and to take care of his sheep. It's that attitude of service that is to be expressed through any authority that Peter has. And that's one of the reasons why one of the titles of the Pope is the servant of the servants of God. The Pope is meant to serve. He's not meant to rule with absolute authority. He's not meant to lord his power over people. He's meant to serve. And if we truly want to understand that, then we need to dive a little deeper into what Jesus' words actually mean. Because when he says, "It is upon this rock that I build my church," like I said before, it's not Peter, but it's the rock of Peter's confession of faith. And that confession of faith is faith in something, or rather in someone. It's an expression of faith in Jesus Christ. There's an old hymn in the church that we sing sometimes that's called "The Church's One Foundation." And the first line of that hymn begins, "The church's one foundation is Jesus Christ the Lord." It's not St. Peter, it's not Peter's profession of faith, it's Christ. And so when Jesus gives Peter this command that he will be the one on which the church is built, it's built on that confession of faith in Jesus Christ. And he's saying, you are to go out and to spread this faith throughout the world. We've seen throughout our history as Catholics what happens when popes don't really hold to that. And all you have to do is look at the history of the church during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and look at all of the history of corruption and stuff that took place when popes valued worldly authority and worldly power over the power of service and being of service to others. When we remember that we're called to be of service to others, regardless of what our role in the church is, from the Pope all the way on down to all of the lay faithful, when we live our lives as lives of service to God and of service to the gospel, it changes everything about how we express our faith. And living that life of service helps us to be able to answer the question better of who Jesus is. Because we can say that we are following in his example of service, of giving our lives for others, and of taking up our crosses daily to follow Christ. So as we continue this Eucharist, we pray that we might be able to live that attitude and live in that way in which we can be of service to others, so that we truly live out the gospel in our lives, and that we truly answer the question of who Jesus is, not just through our words, but through our example as well.